In the last vignette, we mentioned the fact that when God created man, He would surely want man to find Him. And so He gave him a faculty, natural faculties, by which by himself, man by himself, can find God without any help from anybody. And we describe this big help in the sense that the big help that God gave us is the innocent mind and conscience. Now, this was given to us when we were young, but the moment we grow up, it disappears. And therefore, we have to do drastic things in order to recover this God-given gift. Now, what is it that makes this gift of God suddenly disappears? Vain and worldly knowledge. With vanity and worldly knowledge, we lose our innocence, we lose the voice of conscience, and we are left by ourselves. What is vain and worldly wisdom? Anything that man acquires by himself, anything he acquires by his own effort, by his own studies, his own research, anything he has which other men doesn't have. Now, because all these kinds of knowledges are acquired by him, then he begins to value himself. He begins to value the things he had learned, value his own mind, value the things that he does, and this naturally will puff him up. It will develop pride. Vain wisdom is the wisdom of the world. It is the kind of wisdom that the world admires, because it is the wisdom wherein essentially we trust in ourselves. It is haughty self-confidence. Now, everybody therefore who develops his own wisdom and acquires this wisdom all by himself is liable to have confidence in himself. Now, when it comes to searching for God and the true religion, you cannot search for God with self-confidence or with pride. Because the moment you seek God with pride, trusting in yourself, trusting in your own reasoning, you would definitely fall into error. And this was the defect of the Corinthians. Vain wisdom does not only produce pride in us, it makes us foolish. Because the moment you trust in your reasoning power, you begin to disdain being told. And so you begin to disdain revelation. You're impatient with revelations. You are distrustful of the fathers of the church and what the saints have said. And because you are distrustful of all these things, when you are reminded what is written in scriptures and tradition and the fathers of the church, you get angry. When you are reminded, you get angry. And this precisely is what happened to the Corinthians. For Paul, writing to them, says, "And the Jews were angry, and the Greeks disdained the apostolic teaching." So you see how clearly it shows that the Corinthians were completely misled, totally in error, simply because they have used vain and human wisdom in their quest for God, something we should never do. St. Paul continues to accuse the Corinthians precisely of vain wisdom when he said, "You are full of your own ideas and interpretation. Now you are kings, not needing us anymore. You have prided yourselves on a wisdom separated from the apostolic teaching." Confidence in our own reasoning leads to foolishness because it causes in our hearts a disdain for divine revelation. But the Catholic religion, or the teaching of Christ, is found in divine revelation. So if you disdain divine revelation, how can you know the teachings of Christ or the way that leads towards Christ? Your attitude becomes, we don't care what Christ said and what He meant. From now on, I decide what He said and what He meant. If you are seeking for the true God and the true religion, and Scripture is not available to you, the best instrument is your innocent mind and your conscience. But if you have lost your innocent mind because you have grown up, and you have lost your conscience because of repeated evil doings, then you have no choice but to search for the true God and the true religion by using Scriptures and the Fathers of the Church. St. Paul calls vain religion worldly wisdom. This is vanity, and it is worldly. Well, the world is vanity, as all the Old Testament had mentioned. It is trusting in your own powers in arriving at religious truth, which St. Paul says is impossible, instead of going towards divine revelation. In the world, what has happened is that reason has usurp the voice of conscience. Suddenly, mankind had thrown away their conscience, which is the voice of God, and had embraced reason. And today, everybody has done it, in the sense that just because they have studied, they are educated, they graduated, they think their reason is enough in order to save them. Let us see how the battle between that initial innocent mind and conscience and against the vain and worldly wisdom take place. You see, when we were all born, we have this innocent mind and conscience. And for us, even if we disobeyed what our consciences were telling us, we never denied the authority of conscience. We always followed our conscience. Once in a while there are disobediences, but we know deep down inside us that conscience is the voice of God. And so we always listen to that voice. Then we began to grow up, and the world around us began to enter into our souls. And because it has entered, slowly it stained, it tainted our innocent mind and stifled the voice of conscience. And so what happened is slowly unbelief and disobedience entered into our souls. And the moment this unbelief and disobedience entered into our souls, the reason, which is no longer innocent nor guided by conscience, begin to be a follower of our passions. So man no longer are thinking now because his reason is being led by his passion. The reason now led by passion begins to complain against the requirements of God. He starts to say, "Oh, the yoke is too heavy," and he begins to rebel. And this is the beginning of apostasy. And so now man wants to be original, he wants to be different and modern. He wants to show he has his own idea, his own mind, and therefore gradually he goes further and further away from his innocence and from his conscience. Then gradually there is a disdain for the true God, a true disdain who seems to be requiring too much of him. And with his hatred of God comes his hatred of his parents. The first and the fifth commandment always goes hand in hand. When you hate God, you hate your home. When you disobey God, you disobey your parents. And so you see, we can discover the state of the soul of a child just by looking at how he treats his parents. During childhood, we love our religion and we love our homes. But as we despise God, we begin to despise our parents and our home. As we grow in disobedience, our own disobedience becomes our own punishment. Our first true guide, the innocent reason and conscience, as we grow in disobedience, begin to withdraw away from us. And so now, even if we claim that we are Catholics, we find ourselves left in a desolate place by the dim and uncertain light of reason. In the next vignette, we shall try to discuss how to get out of this dim and desolate place called our reason. God bless you.